You wouldn't download a car. You wouldn't download a refrigerator. Hey babies, and welcome back to Detox, your safe space to explore your creativity, expand your critical thinking skills, embrace your cringe, and prime yourself for connection. I have added that last C because I feel like it is a piece of the puzzle that I've been missing. Because in order to be a successful, thriving human being, you have to be creative, you have to be cringy, you have to be critical, and you have to be looking to connect. You have to connect with other people, you have to connect with yourself, you have to connect with your environment, you have to connect with the land. And what is one way that we can really hinder connection? Well, besties, it's lying. It's lying. Baby, your jorts are on fire. Huh, babe, your jorts are on fire. Honestly. So today on the pod, we are talking about lying. And this is such an interesting topic. I am so interested in this idea of lying, why we lie, what payoffs we get from lying, what patterns of lying we can fall into, how we interpret other people's lies. It just, fascinating. It's just such a nice, juicy topic that we're going to get into today, and I'm so excited. I can't wait. The ways in which we lie run, I find, in such concentric circles with the way that we build our own sense of identity. So what I want to say here, and it's not necessarily a disclaimer, but if you're somebody who knows me in real life, and you are listening to this podcast right now, it might come across your mind to think, is David talking about me? And this isn't a comment about even if you are thinking that, because you know what? If I was listening to somebody that I knew in real life and they were talking about lying, hell, if one of my friends was just talking about like drag, because drag is something that I do, not that I'm calling you a liar. It doesn't even need to be something that I know I do. Even if they were talking about, running a marathon, I'd be, well, no, I wouldn't be convinced anybody was talking about me running a marathon. Although I did unsuccessfully run half a marathon in Drumheller once. I want you to disengage from those thoughts to the best of your ability right now. And this isn't necessarily going to be a heavy one. Like for me personally, this isn't going to feel heavy, but I have worked through years of my own lying behavior, and I have been able to reduce the amount of cognitive dissonance I experience with my own self on a regular basis, that this kind of stuff isn't uncomfortable for me anymore. And I can recognize that if you haven't done that within your own self, this can be heavy, it can be triggering, it can be upsetting, and it can really weigh on you. So I can understand that and I can appreciate that. So if this isn't the episode that you want to interact with, if this is the episode that maybe you're starting with and you're like, I don't know if that's the best intro to David to Detox, that's totally fair. Click off and go. However, I do want to encourage you as much as humanly possible to lean into that uncomfort, because on the other side of that discomfort, a lot of the times, at least for me, I find a lot of growth in being uncomfortable. Now, of course, bringing in those other C's, you have to be able to be critical enough to understand whether that uncomfiness is going to be worth it, because you can't be crossing any boundaries that you have set for yourself, which also involves critical thinking and communication. It's all the C's. I'm obsessed with C's apparently, and I'm always saying that. So yeah, today's episode, we're going to be talking about lying in its forms and my personal experience with lying, how I see lying manifest out in the world, and why I think most of us do it. To some extent, I think everybody's a liar. And I don't think all of it is inherently bad, which is a crazy thing to say. But you know what? I haven't completely solidified those thoughts yet, so we're going to get into it. So if this is the first time you've been here, hi, my name is David. And if you haven't been here before, my name is still, in fact, David. I participate in a lot of internet content on YouTube. If you're watching this, hi, hello. You can see me in Technicolor Smell-O-Vision. If you're listening on Spotify, you can hear the beautiful timbre of my sore voice because I was screaming all last night at a show. Not because I was screaming, but the music was so quiet that I compensated for the music being so quiet by singing my number while dancing to it as well, like over the music. And I didn't realize I was like scream singing until the end of the number, and I was like, wow, my throat really hurts. So I'm like Phoebe in that episode of Friends, like my sexy phlegm. It's not necessarily phlegm, but I got something good anyway. So yes, and if you're interested in spending more time with me, this is season 2 of my podcast that you're listening to right now. Season 1 is completely out there for you to listen to. I have a roadside attraction series on my Instagram and TikTok called Does Size Matter? If you want to listen to some terrible puns while I'm standing in front of the world's largest, smallest, most waste of tiny things all over Canada and the United States, you can go follow me there. Do all the things. You can find my links, darling. I used to be so I used to be so worried about like pitching myself and like, here's my link and here's my actual username so you can find it. But honestly, if you're listening to this and you're interested, you will become a certified amateur sleuth and you'll be able to find my shit. So, oh God. Okay. So without further ado, besties, let's get into your jorts are on fire. No, I don't think that's going to be the title because that's too specific. I don't even know if everybody knows what jorts are. But yeah, let's get into liar, lying. I don't know. We're really workshopping the titles, but let's get into liars, babes. Okay, besties, so we're going to take it back here. And before we really get into this first topic about lying here, is I want you to understand the difference between a lie and a liar, right? There's kind of two different ways that we can think about the act of lying. And I just want to make it really clear here is that I don't think it's helpful I don't think it's helpful or necessarily appropriate to assign the label of liar to a person, even if that person lies a lot or even a little bit, right? Because I don't think it's fair to paint one whole person with the same brush and say that they're a liar, because even if somebody is caught up in the loop of consistently lying, it's just not helpful in my experience to label them as a liar, even though it might feel appropriate to do so. We're looking at the lie as an action and not a noun, right? A lie is a thing that you can do. It's an activity you can make the choice to engage in, but sometimes the choice kind of gets shoved under different levels of cognitive dissonance, which is where we're heading here as our first thing to talk about. But yeah, I don't want you to think about people as liars. I want you to think about lying as something that people engage in. And there's so many different kinds of lies that we'll get into, but I think a really big way that we can get caught up into these patterns of lying is related to this theory of cognitive dissonance. So you've probably heard the phrase before. We're going to listen to a little soundbite right now. This is on YouTube by Andy Luttrell, and they have a podcast called Opinion Science. There's a whole episode on cognitive dissonance that was published about 7 years ago on his podcast. So you can go and listen to that on YouTube, and it's probably on Spotify. I haven't looked, but we're going to use this as a bit of a jumping off point to understand not only what cognitive dissonance is, but how that connects to somebody who lies and kind of how that manifests. So yeah, let's listen to what Andy has to say.
At the very basics, cognitive dissonance is about inconsistency. When we hold two thoughts that are inconsistent with one another, basically, that's dissonance. So let's take...
Oh, you know what? He's going to give an example, but I'm going to give you an example from my life right now. So you hold two opinions that conflict with each other. I know smoking is bad, but I love smoking. Look at me talking about smoking now on this podcast. But hey, that's a piece of my life. And a big part of why I've been able to continue to let myself smoke for so long, a decade really, is because of this cognitive dissonance and how I wasn't able to close the gap between two contrasting beliefs, right? I know smoking is bad for me and my health and I want to stop, but I also really enjoy it and I can't stop, right? I mean, in this example in particular, there's also like, there's a lot of science of addiction behind, and smoking and nicotine is very hard to give up. So that's not really what we're talking about here today. But yeah, having two contrasting ideas. Let's see what Andy's example was.
Example of someone who smokes cigarettes.
Oh my God. I did not pre-watch this. That is so funny. Okay. Well, yeah. I guess it's the easy example. That's really funny.
The person who might have two distinct thoughts, one of which is, I regularly smoke cigarettes.
I did almost a pack a day. It was a lot. Not the whole time, not my 10 years as a smoker, but I would say the last like year of my smoking, I was almost at a pack a day. It was getting wild. I had like the nicotine stains on my fingers and everything, and I'd never had that before. Those are gone now. That's nice.
The other of which is the knowledge that smoking cigarettes is unhealthy. Here are two thoughts that a person can be having at the same time.
It's so upsetting. It's so upsetting. And sometimes because you're so upset about it, you seek out a way to comfort yourself, which is usually engaging in one of the behaviors that is one of the contrasting thoughts. So like, I feel so bad that I smoke cigarettes, even though I know that smoking is unhealthy. So I'm going to attempt to console myself by smoking more cigarettes. It's like lying to yourself. Oh yeah, that's a huge category of this conversation, is like lying to yourself. We all lie to ourselves, and that's what cognitive dissonance is.
Acknowledging both of these things as fact, but they would seem inconsistent with one another. If you know that smoking is bad, then logically you probably wouldn't be engaging in that activity yourself. And so this is a case of dissonance because there's inconsistency in your own thoughts. You have to think that the inconsistency in your thoughts is going to play out poorly for some reason in the future.
Ooh, now this is a really interesting one. You have to perceive your dissonance as having negative consequences. And if you are lying to yourself, it is very hard to see these things. But sometimes what's particularly difficult about the situation as well is if you have people in your life that are lying to themselves and experiencing an incredible amount of cognitive, the enunciation is just really killing me here. If you have people in your life who you are close to who are experiencing an incredible amount of cognitive dissonance and they're not able to recognize these if they're not able to recognize these negative consequences of their own behavior, I mean, it happens with everybody. We all lie to ourselves about something, and hopefully we all have people in our life that love us. And it's really hard when the people in our lives exhibit that kind of behavior because we want to help them, but sometimes when we attempt to help them, it just makes it worse, right? You need to work in such a way where you're pulling people instead of pushing people, right? And it's really easy to come in smoking hot and make somebody uncomfortable and then get them on the defense, and then you're not actually going to make any headway with them. But yeah, you have to be able to recognize the negative consequences, or you have to actually believe them. And if we're going back to that smoking example, for me, I was young. I'm still young. I'm 27 years old. Like I didn't have really the physical consequences of smoking, even though I did. My lungs are still good, and like I wasn't seeing many physical consequences of my smoking. But really, now that I've stopped, I'm able to recognize all of those negative consequences because I'm on the other side of it now. So the lungs in particular, like I'm sleeping better, I'm breathing better, I'm doing better in the gym, I'm burning more calories, my blood flow is better. Like it's overall, I'm able to recognize these negative consequences, and it's helping me keep the gap of that cognitive dissonance closed. But before I stopped, it's hard to see those things when you're still in the same pattern. So when we look at somebody in a pattern of lying to themselves, we sometimes want to shock them out of it because we think, if you can just like get a break from this behavior, even but just for a moment, you'll be able to just see it all. But it doesn't always work like that, and it's so specific on a case by case basis too. Yeah, a big part of this is how people lie to themselves. So I don't. I was gonna say I invite you to be curious about the ways in which you are lying to yourself, but it's so hard unless you have this level of awareness that takes so long to develop within yourself. Because if there are things about yourself that you want to change, and no, not if, we are all human beings, and I fully operate under the fundamental understanding that there are things about ourselves that we want to change and that we want to modify. And I'm not necessarily talking about physical things. Some of these things can fit under that umbrella of physical things that we want to change about ourselves, but it's not necessarily the bulk of what I'm intending for you to be thinking about here. Unless you are some kind of incredible outlier, there are things about yourself that you're probably interested in not necessarily changing completely, but modifying and growing, and goals. And I'm a very goal-oriented person, so hey, maybe I'm just projecting that onto you, but there's so many things that I want to learn and get better at and develop skills and be able to do that are all related to my skills and behavior, right? The most expensive thing that I can possibly wear is my brain, and the way that I develop it is so important to me. And it's probably important to you too if you're listening to this as well. But unfortunately, you won't have access to working on those goals if you are not aware of your behavior at all times. And the way that this connects to cognitive dissonance is that when you are engaging in behavior that you don't like, we often separate ourselves from having this awareness of that behavior in order to feel better about it, in order to have space between us and the behavior that we are engaging in that we don't like. Now, how do we bring ourselves to a higher level of awareness? It's practice. It's slowing down, and it's putting space around those moments where you do something that you don't like. So here's my example for me that's not related to smoking. We're going to leave smoking in the past. But I have to say that I grew up such a judgmental person, and I felt that within me even into my adult years. I'm going to say I was, because I've worked really hard on this, but it doesn't always that work doesn't always follow me in my day to day, because sometimes I do feel those moments of judgment for other people. And it made me really uncomfortable for a lot of years, and it contributed to my low self-esteem probably for my entire life. But I didn't realize that's what it was because I wasn't aware of it. So I would be walking down the street and I would see somebody. It didn't matter who it was, it didn't matter what they were doing or what they were wearing or literally anything. My brain would just automatically pass a judgment on that person because that's how things were modeled for me when I was growing up. That this idea of judgment, and it's not just specific to the people that I grew up around with either. It's more like the societal way that we feel the need to pass judgment on other people. It's out there in social media. It's not really like specific to my family. I think the specificity is in the families that don't hold that level of judgment for other people, especially growing up in like a Catholic school system. Ooh, like girl, it's literally called Judgment Day. Like there, the this idea of judgment in order to manage the behavior of others is very strong in not just Catholicism, but in other denominations of religion as well. Religion is another episode I want to get into here on the pod, but that's not this one here for us today. But yeah, sometimes judgment is used as a weapon in order to manage the behavior of others, right? Which is a problem in itself. But the problem is here is that if you are engaging in such a high level of judgmental thought with other people, you are judging yourself just as much, if not even harsher, than the people outside of you who are judging outside of you. That sounded weird, but the people who are not you that you're judging, right? So the way that this connects is that if you're not able to notice that behavior, you're not going to be able to change that behavior. So I moved through the world for a long time being aware that I was uncomfortable, being aware that I didn't have high self-confidence, but I didn't know why. I couldn't figure out why, because I wasn't bringing my awareness, I wasn't putting space around those moments where I felt the most uncomfortable. Because let's say I would be out walking in public and I would see somebody with like a really bright outfit on. Now, this is quite specific to me. I would see someone, let's say, dressed in all pink, and I would look at them and think, ooh, yeah, maybe that's a little bit much. But then immediately I would judge myself and think, well, how does my outfit stack up? Or like, ooh, I remember when I wore a pink outfit like that, and oh, that must have been awful. Or people must have been thinking about me in the same way that I was thinking about this person in this moment. And it creates this cycle of judgment. And I've said this in another podcast too, but like in this example, you're essentially using other people to bully yourself when they're not even a part of the equation. So that's a really big part of bringing your awareness to those things that you don't want to engage in anymore. And you have to be able to take those moments where you are uncomfortable and be willing to investigate them a little bit. And it's the same with the smoking, right? I enjoyed smoking, but I was really hard on myself for smoking. And for whatever reason, again, I would pass judgment on people that I would see smoking out on the street. But like, bitch, you're a smoker too. Like, how am I able to pass judgment on people engaging in a behavior that I do as well? Like like lying to yourself. And this idea of cognitive dissonance, it's so interesting to me because the ways that we can engage in these mental gymnastics in order to soothe ourselves into perpetuating this behavior that we know is bad, we know it's not getting us anywhere, but we're just still engaging it, almost like the loop of an addiction. So when you are uncomfortable with things that you do, slow down, put some space around it, and really try and dig in and think, why am I feeling this way? What is there a way that I could modify this behavior? And that's kind of like the step 2 of getting into not doing that. Because and this phase of becoming aware of that behavior takes a long time. And in many moments, I am still within that phase of only recognizing that behavior, because once you recognize it, you can slowly start to build this catalog of ways to get yourself out of those thought patterns. Those thought patterns effectively may never disappear, or at least in my experience, they haven't disappeared yet. But what I'm able to do is sit with that thought for a brief moment, kind of talk myself through it, and I'm able to let it go, right? It's kind of like I'm sitting It's kind of like I'm sitting in the Bow River, right? The water level of the river is about 2 feet high, and I'm sitting in a folding chair, and the water's up to like my knees, and I just have my hands out on either side, just a few inches into the water, and these judgmental thoughts are fish that are swimming past, and I need to be able to watch that fish, that negative thought, swim into my hand. I need to be able to look at it, be present with it for a moment, and then let it go. I can't hold on to it. I can't pull my hand out of the water to avoid it, because that fish is going to stay there, and then it's going to get hungry, and then it's going to start nipping at your ankles or your feet or your hands, or it's going to jump into your lap. And the more you ignore some of those things, the more disruptive they can become in your life. And if you continue to ignore that, that little fish is going to come back as a shark, and then you're going to have mooey problems with those judgmental thoughts. If you're not able to notice them, not hold on to them, but just let them go. That's one of the meditations I love to do when I'm feeling uncomfortable, is that I just sit in a spot where I'm comfortable. I close my eyes and I hold my hands out on either side, and I just let those thoughts that are coming to me into my hands. I feel them, I look at them, and then I'm able to pass them on. Because, and like I've said this before, you do not have control over your thoughts. You have about half control over your feelings, and you have 100% control of your actions. So if you're able to sit through all of those thoughts in order to somehow influence some of your feelings, you can then find a lot more ease in controlling all of your actions, right? It's something that requires practice. You need to keep going, and it's a lifetime of, it's something that you can work on for an entire lifetime and still in moments struggle with it. And that's okay. The important part is that you're not hard on yourself when you struggle in those moments. We've covered lying to yourself in the ways that we can use it to almost bully ourselves. But that part was interesting, but we're going to take a little bit of a break here. And when we come back, we are going to discuss lying to others. This is where it's going to get, again, this is where things might get a little uncomfortable too, because I think a lot of us are maybe a bit more comfortable, at least for me, thinking about the ways in which we lie to ourselves. But sometimes the ways in which we lie to other people and the reasons behind why we lie to other people are very uncomfortable to face. And it kind of all goes through this same thing of like, you have to be aware, and you can pull back the layers of your motivation of why you're lying to others, literally until the cows come home, because the cows are in fact never coming home. So yes, we're going to take a little bit of a break here, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about lying to other people. So get rid of all your dissonance, girl, because this one might be a little bit of a doozy. And it might be a doozy if you're somebody who regularly engages with lying to others. I'm sorry, I'm saying it, but I feel particularly positioned to do this because I have struggled with this for so long. Okay, I'm stepping on this. We'll be right back. We are going to continue our conversation here about lying to other people, and we have to think about why. Why are we lying to other people? There are so many reasons that we can lie to other people. There are so many different reasons as to why we can develop behavior patterns of lying to other people. And the first one that I want to talk about here is this idea of safety. Because if you are somebody who not only grew up, but if you're somebody who has been through situations where your safety has been in question, it makes complete sense that you would have developed this pattern of lying, not only to yourself, but especially to others, and to manipulate situations in order to maintain your safety. And I am not here to engage in any victim blaming, because it's not, there is a level of this that is not your fault. If you are somebody who has been in situations where you needed to effectively lie to maintain your level of safety, I'm glad you did that. And I'm glad that you were able to develop those skills in order to maintain your safety. And that's not to say that if your safety was compromised, it was your fault for not lying effectively enough or things like that. But sometimes we fall into these behaviors just in order to keep ourselves safe. And that's completely valid. And I think to some extent, a lot of us go through that, obviously to varying levels as well. But what does then become your responsibility, and the onus does fall on you, yes, you listening to this right now, is then unpacking those things when your sense of safety is restored. And that does come from a place of privilege, because not everybody is able to come back to that idea of safety. Not everybody then achieves that level of safety. And I mean, it's hard because you can work yourself, you can mentally gymnastics yourself into thinking anything, and not that dissimilar to the feelings of an addiction. How am I going to say this? Is that sometimes you actually have to reteach your brain that you are in fact safe when your brain is sending you signals that you are not. It's kind of, again, that lying to yourself, but this is a bit more from like a neuroscience perspective, because if you have a brain that has gone through periods of not feeling safe for long enough, you do get into that, what is it, adrenal overdrive, adrenal burnout, where you're just constantly in a state of fight or flight, that you do have to almost reparent yourself and reteach yourself that you are safe in the moments that you are safe, even when your brain thinks differently, right? So my example for this was just, I think, growing up in general. I grew up, I was going to say, I grew up fat and gay as if it was past tense, but I guess, yeah, when I, and I've made jokes about this before, but like, you can't be fat and gay. Absolutely you can, but it was really hard. And I'm not sitting here to be sad fishing about this either. And I do feel that emotional response that's coming out in me right now as well. But I was I was so horrendously bullied by people around me, both adults and my student peers, when I was moving through elementary school, middle school, high school. And the worst part about it all is that I was one of my worst bullies amongst all of these other people that were doing it to me as well. It's like we were all feeding into each other in order just to make David feel like shit. And I don't think that's that much of a unique situation either. I think a lot of us go through that, especially, like, I can speak from the communities that I was a part of, or that I feel I was a part of. So like the fat and gay community, like those are my people now. But it's really hard because you can develop this idea of lying to others and lying to yourself in order to maintain that safety. But now that I am out of that, I no longer identify as gay, so that's something. And I don't know if I I have lost a lot of weight. I've lost at this point like 130, 140, something like that pounds. But I don't know if that idea of the fat kid will ever leave the way that I think and the way that I move around the world. I don't know if I'll ever move around the world with the identity of a skinny person. I don't know. Stay tuned on that. It doesn't really matter. But my idea of safety, I had to reteach myself in this last handful of years that I am, in fact, safe. And I had to retrain my nervous system in order to just exist in the world and not feel like I needed to lie to other people and lie to myself in order to maintain that level of safety. So connecting this back, the onus does then come to you to reteach yourself that you are safe in order to work on this idea of lying to yourself and others when you are tricking yourself into thinking that you're still not safe when you are. Again, not everybody achieves that level of safety, so that comes with privilege, but you are responsible for your actions. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're responsible for those lies. And sometimes, if you are held accountable by, there's so many variables here too, right? Because if you're held accountable by somebody that you care about, it can be easier. But if somebody attempts to hold you accountable and you don't respect them already, like a school principal who you don't care so much about, it's going to push you farther, probably, into your lies. I know it's a very specific example. I don't know how I'm giving it to you. Anyway, those lies that we tell other people in order to maintain our safety can be for so many reasons. Like, and these lies that we can tell other people in order to maintain our safety, they can be big ones and they can be small ones. And the next kind of lying that I want to talk about here is lying by omission. And this kind of gets into the land of manipulation as well. And I'm really interested in this topic. And I've kind of coined this term for myself, manipulating by omission, because I don't always see this idea of lying fitting into that same category. But manipulating violating by omission. So what I mean by this is presenting only a certain subset of information to another person in order to curate the way you want to make them feel about themselves, about you, or about any given situation. And a lot of this comes down to you wanting to be able to be in control of the way that other people see you. Now, this is a defense mechanism for many things, but from my personal example, from my personal experience, I engaged in this behavior because I had a very low level of self-esteem, and because I thought nobody can see me for me. I have to be able to control the way that other people see me in order for me to feel safe. And that kind of connects to all of these things that we've been, it's really all connected. It is painfully cyclical here, and all in concentric circles. Again, everything starts with a C, but it can be really damaging if it is so damaging not only to yourself but to other people if you are constantly manipulating other people. And it's hard because I remember I grew up like that. I grew up manipulating people by omission, and even into my early 20s, it was something that I did as well. And it ruined relationships for me. It did. And I wasn't able to see how my behavior was affecting other people in the moment. And that's not like love relationships. It was also like friendships and like professional relationships and things like that. Like I would just engage in that way. I would attempt to manipulate the way that other people would see myself in situations in order to have them perceive me in a certain way. And some people, if they have done that work, or at least started that work, like myself, can recognize that. They can call you on it. And I have developed some ways in which to not delightfully, I have developed some of the ways in which you can invite people in to start those conversations, but it doesn't always work, and it's very context specific. But even if somebody hasn't done the work, they're uncomfortable around you. They don't know why, but a lot of people have this sense of unease around people who manipulate by omission, even though they're not able to recognize why. It doesn't always happen that way, but a lot of people get that deep sense. It's like that gut feeling of, right? Of like, this person doesn't feel safe. I don't know what it is. It feels like a red flag, but I'm not able to put my finger on it. And I think a big part of that, at least in my experience, has been dealing with people who manipulate by omission. The problem with this is that it's very much a self-fulfilling prophecy, which means that the way that these two people then start interacting with each other just start to make things worse. Because if I'm attempting to manipulate somebody by omission and they look like they're uncomfortable, I then get more uncomfortable for a multitude of reasons. Either they're not buying what I'm selling and I need to work harder in order to maintain this idealized version that I want them to see me as. Holy shit. If you're still following me, this is so like, I was going to say I'm barely following me, but no, this makes perfect sense to me because these are my thoughts. But yeah, like stay with me here if you can. Like this is some deep shit here. And right, like I've had those relationships, and oh good, like God help you if both of you were attempting to manipulate each other by omission, because then it's just this sick and twisted back and forth of like gaslighting each other. And if you're not aware of it either, it's really easy to like assign yourself into this victimhood. And that's another big part of this as well. Like if somebody has invited you in to have these conversations, if you're not ready for it, it can feel very personal and it can feel very upsetting, and things can feel very black and white for people who do, I was going to say, either on purpose or inadvertently manipulate by omission. And again, we have to go back. The people that manipulate by omission, it's not like they sat down one morning and was like, here are the ways in which I'm going to be shitty and attempt to deceive those who I love. It's not a judgment on those people. It's not a judgment on their character. I now think highly of myself. I didn't before, but I think very highly of myself. And a part of the ways that I've been able to get away from this behavior is not, again, passing judgment on myself for those past decisions. Because if you're judging yourself about your behavior, it makes it so much harder to get out of it. So if you're able to put space around those things that you do in order to just conceptualize them, if you're able to put space around those things that you do in order to understand them. It can be really meaningful for you on your journey of getting away from lying by omission. And sometimes it sneaks right out. Sometimes it sneaks right away from you and you don't even really realize it. And something that I like, okay, I mean, girl, you're listening to my podcast right now. Like, you know that I'm a content creator. I've been out here doing all this other stuff. It's been, oh God, like not quite a calendar year, but I have been pounding my ass into the pavement working on my catalog of content here for the past what, 7 months now. And it's something that now only maybe in the last handful that I've been thinking about the ways in which I represent myself online and through my content in such an authentic way, because I have recognized this in kind of like a twofold way. I need to be able to authentically express myself in order to feel fulfilled in the art that I'm presenting to the world. But I've also realized that people aren't as willing to engage in the content that you have to offer if you are not being authentic, and if you are manipulating people by omission, or if you are overtly lying to people as well. And again, it's not this like big thing that we can assign malice intent to all the time. Like, it's not some big bad liar. Like, it's not the wolf in sheep's clothing, or it's not the wolf in the Little Red Riding Hood outfit who's like out to deceive you and be awful to you. That's not how this goes for the most part. There are those people, but they're easier to recognize, which I think is part of the problem, is that sometimes it's people close to us who have fallen into these patterns of behavior and they're not able to recognize it for themselves. It's a really interesting thing of like maintaining a level of authenticity and being honest while you are creating content for the world. Because like, okay, here's my example. I went a handful of weeks ago, I went to LA to an Oscars viewing party in Universal Studios, Paramount Studios, one of those ones. I think it was in Hollywood. I just plugged it into the Uber. It was somewhere up there. And like a big banquet hall, with like the round tables, like 10 people to a table. And like, it was a big thing. And there were three like big screens, it was live streaming the Oscars. And it was put together by an individual, like an event producer, an event promoter. I say this like anybody else. Even if you think about like the Oscars, like the actual event itself, at some point it was just somebody who decided to start some event. Like, literally everything is just done by some guy or like some girl, like it. But the level of, I don't know, the level of prestige assigned to this event. How am I going to go about saying this here? This one's a little, okay. So I went to this event, right? And there were pictures and there were red carpets there. But like, even just thinking that, what is a red carpet? It was in fact a carpet that was red. And there were like studio lights there. And there were people with cameras. And like with the backdrop of like the picture of me on the red carpet is on my Instagram. I was in drag with a red skirt and a red corset and top and black pin straight wig. Like, it was great. My look was great. But it was interesting because, okay, I'm posting this picture on Instagram of me on the red carpet and I'm in LA and that's where my photo was tagged and it's the Oscars. So is David at the Oscars? I'm not necessarily lying to my audience, but I am leaving out part of that information that implies that I was there. You know what I mean? That's what I'm getting at here, is that manipulating by omission. It's like the influencers that are out there that are presenting things to you in such a way in order to make you think one thing when in fact it is not the case. Right? And it implies this level of not being confident in yourself enough in order to authentically show up in the world. Because honestly, girls, at the end of the day, I was still in full drag in LA at an Oscars watch party. Like, that was fucking cool. And like, yeah, it's a red carpet, but like, who cares where it is? Like, there's such a level of privilege that I had in order even to be at that event. And it was amazing. And I met people that were great. I did networking. Like, it was a fantastic evening. I had a great time, but I think I should still be able to represent that authentically without manipulating people by omission. And like, when I was sitting down publishing that photo, was that something that I was necessarily thinking about while I was doing it? Like, did I tell anybody that I was explicitly going to the Oscars? But then you even dig down a little bit deeper there with the use of language, because was I saying I'm going to the Oscars? or I'm going to LA for the Oscars. I did say that to some people. They're like, why are you going? I'm like, oh, I'm going for the Oscars, which is true. I wouldn't have been going to LA if the Oscars wasn't taking place in LA, but was I actually going to that event itself? No. So was I intentionally trying to manipulate people when I posted that picture of me on the red carpet? No. But what is my responsibility as a content creator to present myself in such an authentic way, to build a community of people that trust me, but more importantly, for me to build a sense of identity where I can trust myself? Because it is impossible to be lying to other people if you are not in turn lying to yourself, which is again how this gets really cyclical. So this became very apparent to me, this idea of like manipulation by omission and attempting to control the ways in which other people see you. It became very apparent to me at this Oscars watch party itself, because there were people that were there that were acting so rude, entitled, more important than other people. Like there was a lineup, like it was a ticketed event, like paid for tickets to go to this event. So everybody's in line, and it was such a, there were so many people in line that were stopping people that were working the event, and they're like, hi, yeah, like, is this the line to get in? Like, I'm an important person, and like, is this the line? And just like having those same conversations over and over again of like, why are you acting like that? Why are you trying to act so important? Like, who are you trying to convince here? Are you trying to convince this whoever the hell 21-year-old with a name tag on that you're important, because he doesn't give a shit about you? Like, I'm sorry, he doesn't. And you trying to act like you're more important than the Queen of Sheba, I don't even know who that is. It comes off odd, and people don't want to spend their time around people like that. What was I doing in line? I was getting to know the queer people around me, because I can spot them like an owl looking for mice in a forest. I can spot those queer people, and I want to find them, and I want to talk to them, because I love waiting in lines, which sounds very counterintuitive, but I love talking to people. Only the good ones, not the ones who are trying to sound important. Anyway, I digress. So many people at this event were acting in ways that were, I believe, to be manipulative. And I'll double down on that. Like, you don't need to act in such a way in order to control the way that other people see you, if you are just navigating your life with an authentic expression. Because this is another part of this as well. If you're lying to yourself and others, you have no idea how much effort that takes to maintain until you are out of it. That can keep you in your adrenal overdrive, and that can keep you in burnout, because it's so much more mental work in order to control the ways that other people see you when you are engaged in that behavior on a regular basis. It's exhausting, bestie. And again, it's so painfully cyclical, because how do you get out of that when you're already so tired? How can you actually begin to engage in a new pattern of behavior when you're already exhausted? And a big part of it is you have to become tired enough of your own bullshit in order to motivate yourself to come out of it. And for me, I do, as a person, fundamentally have a very low level of tolerance for bullshit. So I was able to kind of jumpstart myself out of this behavior at a very young age. Maybe, I don't know when it really started for me. I would say I started this journey at like age 18 is when I started, because before that I was engaging in that manipulating by omission and lying by omission. Hell, even a handful of years ago, I was still knee deep in manipulating by omission, but I was overtly lying until age about 17, which does lead me to our last topic, but I'm not quite done talking about the Oscars party yet. But our last topic is overt lying here before we finish up. But anyway, so all of these people, not all of them, but there was a distinct handful of people that were acting this way at this Oscars party. And it was cool because, well, it wasn't cool, but it was interesting because I was able to fill the gaps and actually make some really meaningful connections when people were acting in this way. So, for example, a lot of people were being assholes to the, I'm trying to swear less, I really am, but sometimes you need to punctuate with an asshole. Anyway, some people were being very rude to the people who were working. So like the people who, or the table of women that were checking people in. So you would come in and like give your ID, and they would cross-reference with their list, and like tell you where you were sitting, etc. And it was a long line to get in. I probably waited for like an hour to get into this event. I was also late, so like part of that was on me, but like I didn't care. I was talking with, I forget her name, but I made a friend in line, and we're having a great time, you know, just chit-chatting and shooting a word that's not a swear, right? So when people would be acting like that to the service people, I would go up behind them or after that interaction would be had, I just have this specific memory of this man or of this woman like yelling at everybody to follow a certain instruction. I forget what the instruction was, but nobody was really listening to her except me and this person who were standing beside each other. I forget what the instruction was, but people were just ignoring her. And I got up to her and I was like, "Are people being nice to you?" And it just kind of came out. I was like, "Are people being nice to you?" And she said, "No." Like, "I'm sorry about that. That's really shitty." And we just had such like a beautiful moment of authenticity where I was able to be present with this person. And I did that again at the bar, and like there were vendors there as well. And there was like, I don't know, this young girl, she was probably like 20 or something, and she was attempting to like do samples. I forget what it was, but some kind of consumable sample. It was a not an edible sample, like a, I don't know, a product of some kind. And just she didn't look happy, but I could tell that she was happy. You know what I mean? Like she looked like a nice, bright young person, but she didn't look happy in the situation. So I had my drink and like I didn't know anybody at this event. I rolled up on my own, which is another podcast episode in itself of doing things by yourself. I'm obsessed with doing things by myself. It's probably a trauma response, and I'm probably lying to myself in some of those ways. But anyway, that's not what this is about. This is juicy. This is like I don't think I've ever talked in this much succession before. Like I could literally go on about this for hours, but it's so interesting to me, the psych and the neuropsych behind all this. Anyway, but I just stood beside this girl and like she looked at me as if I wanted a sample, and I was like, "No, that's okay." I was like, "Oh right, I remember how I opened my conversation with her. I started with, what the hell's going on here?" And I saw in that one single moment just all of that sadness melt away, and she looked at me and she went, "I don't know." Because I got the sense that the majority of people were trying to manipulate everybody else by omission, or manipulate everybody else's perception of them in that moment, because everybody wanted to feel important. But honestly, if you're engaging in that, you have to have a developed sense of insuperiority, because doesn't it make sense that if you don't feel comfortable with who you are at a base level, you're not able to actually let people in to see who you are as a person? But the problem here is that you can't start engaging in that behavior if you don't know who you are as a person to begin with. And it's even harder to engage in that. It's like dominoes, bestie. It's impossible to know who you are as a person if you are lying to yourself in pretty much any way. So it really all comes back to this cognitive dissonance idea and how you tell yourself the story of your life. If you are lying to yourself, you are lying to others. And it's like a tree that starts, and the roots of it is lying to yourself. And that tree of lying, like a tree of life, but a tree of lying, just blossoms into this huge thing that can take over your life if you keep watering it. And then you can look up and it's like this huge redwood, and you think, how the fuck am I going to chop that down? Because it would almost feel impossible. But you got to hit the drought, bestie. You got to cut it off at the base. It's the chopper off at the base kind of day, and you got to like not water it, and eventually it'll dry out. It'll take a long time. It'll start, but then sometimes it might rain and it might get a little green again, and you get worried, but don't get caught back up in it, because you're like, "Oh, well, these branches are already turned. There's new leaves on this one, so I might as well water the whole thing and like forget the whole idea." But no. Starve the nutrients from that lying tree, let it die. Eventually it will fall. It'll take a long time. And I read the other day that if you are close to letting go of some ingrained sense of bad behavior or a bad habit or a bad trauma that you're working through, the last little moment before a breakthrough is often the most uncomfortable. So don't confuse that last few moments of being uncomfortable with something you're working through, push you back into that behavior, because you want to close that gap of discomfort of cognitive dissonance. So that's where we're going to leave it there. So we have one last thing to talk about, is this sense of overtly lying to others. Now this one's quick because it's the most dramatic sense of lying. It's really interesting here. So, but this might be like the most comedic part of this episode as well. Of course, I'm going to send you away feeling a little bit funny as well, because this one has the potential to be pretty heavy for you. So we're going to take one more break, and I'll be right back to talk about overt lying. God, what has my life turned into? I love it though. I'll take it. Okay, we'll be right back. All right, so we're back on our lying episode here on DTalk, and the last thing that we're going to talk about here together is this idea of overtly lying, and just Like it might be most easy to identify or attribute this idea of overtly lying to other people as like a kid thing. The kid that's like has it's the TikTok trend of like who ate my chocolate covered strawberries and it pans around and everybody's like it wasn't me, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. And then you get the picture of somebody's face and they're like covered in chocolate and they're like it wasn't me. Those kinds of like lies that are easy to prove. Those do happen as well, but I don't know if I view those as like the least kind of negative or the least impactful, maybe because they're the least manipulative, right? Like what we've talked about so far is like this art of deception, and these overt lies again do have a bit of deception to them as well, but eventually they all come from this deep-rooted sense, I believe, in my opinion. I am of the belief that my opinion is as follows because when I tell you what I'm about to tell you, then you will be told my opinion is that so much of it is rooted in either a sense of not being safe or having a level of self-confidence issues, right? And a lot of the ways in which you engage with people who you know are overtly lying about something can really inform how that person moves forward, not only in just their relationship with you, but in their relationship with others. So I have two kind of super anecdotal things to share with you right now for this idea of overtly lying. And one of them comes from my teaching experience. Now, if you are a teacher, you know this, but for those of you who are not, especially those of you who maybe have not had experience in an elementary school, um, the way in which every student is your student, if it's a school with good culture, is really the case. So, like for example, if it's my break and my kids are out at recess and I'm walking through the hallway and a kindergartner who is not a student in my class is having a rough go and like you can visually tell that this child needs help, you stop and help them, right? Even in the moments where they don't need help, if somebody is like laughing really hard, like I was that teacher who, if a kid is like hysterically laughing in the hallway, I'm going to ask what's funny because I want to know. I love to laugh too. Can you tell me? Or like somebody obviously like looks proud while they're holding an art project. Like, I want to know about it. Tell me, like, what did you make here? It looks really cool. Or like, somebody's crying. Like, as I walk by, I'm not going to walk by somebody who looks upset without going, "You all right, babes?" Right? Like, it's that quick moment of, hey, I see you. Are you okay? Can I do something for you? You can't always do something for you. And ultimately, ooh, this is a whole other podcast topic, isn't it? I do have my example and I remember it, but I'm getting farther away from it, right? Sometimes people can't tell you what they need, but if you can just be present with them and make them feel seen and heard, it really like feeling heard is so close to feeling loved that most often we can't even distinguish the difference. Anyway, Gandhi, I love your work. Actually, no, I feel like that's a Jodi Carrington quote. Love Jodi Carrington. Anyway, so you just develop a relationship with everybody in the building, no matter what, right? Or ideally, you are as a good educator, and and if you are somebody who has been in a school community for a while, you begin to know like the different families and the different siblings and this and that. So I remember walking through the hallway with another teacher who I really looked up to, one of just probably the image of one of the best teachers, educators that I know. Loved this person for who they were as a person and the way that they interacted with children. So good. And I learned so much from this teacher. And you're about to know why, because this example is about them. There was a family that was a part of the school that I was in that was going through a lot of challenges and was struggling in a number of ways. And this teacher that I was walking with had an awareness of those challenges because they had taught those students in that family. There were many, many siblings in this family, I think probably 7 or 8, ranging from somewhere in high school, and then one was in kindergarten and one was in grade 2. Right? And the grade 2 classroom wing was quite far away from the kindergarten classroom wing. And it's the middle of class. I don't remember why I was just walking around. My kids might have been in gym or whatever, doesn't matter. And the kindergarten sister was in the bathroom and the grade 2 girl was standing in the doorway of the bathroom. And this was in the kindergarten hallway. So the kindergarten sister was in the right spot, whatever, that's normal. She's in the washroom that's near her classroom, but the grade 2 girl was there. And that kind of raises a red flag because why are you across the school, right? And I remember that teacher going up to that girl, the grade 2 sister in the doorway, and going, "Hey, what's up? You all right? Like, what are you doing here?" And she looked nervous right away. Like, she looked like she was in trouble. And it's easy to tell if you know, right? And She had this look of fear on her face, and it made my heart sad to see this look on this kid's face even to begin with. And then she was like, yeah, no, it's good, and wasn't saying anything specific as to why she was there. But that teacher, because she was very emotionally intelligent, kind of just stood there and went like, okay, like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And then all of a sudden, you could hear the kindergarten sister kind of struggling in the washroom with, she was having a problem. I don't know if she was changing or this or that, but she was having a problem. And then it completely made sense as to why this grade two sister was across the school with the kindergarten sister, because she was helping her little sister with this problem that she was having, and almost like keeping watch at the door for anybody to walk in to maintain the dignity of her younger sister. It was such an incredible moment of humanity that these two little girls were having for each other. And it it makes me emotional even now, because these little kids had such a defined sense of how much they cared about each other. And not all the teachers would have acted in the way that this. I'm going to just take a second here. I think sometimes as teachers, it's really easy to not give kids the amount of credit that I think they deserve when it comes to emotional intelligence. And I think to some extent as well, it's a self-fulfilling it's a self. Whew, girl, that really got me. Okay, to some extent, I think it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you think kids aren't aware of things and just kids are dumb and they don't know, and that kind of idea that some people have about kids, which I don't understand, it's easy to think that they don't know what's going on if you're not actually paying attention. But once you were paying attention, you knew that that girl was there to help her sister. And if you are somebody who is operating out of ego, or like you're being defiant, or like does all of that kind of stuff, it would have been really easy to say to that girl, get back to your classroom, what are you doing here, right? So it's acting without knowing what's going on. Anyway, this isn't related to lying, what I've said so far, but the next part does, so stay with me. She said, okay, sweetheart, does your teacher know that you're here, or are you being a good sister? And I remember hearing that sentence. Why am I going to cry again? It's just, because it's all the way that you use your language, because it would have been so easy. I think I'm having such an emotional response to this is because I didn't get this when I was a kid. And I don't think a lot of people get this when they were a kid, because it's really easy to blame people. It would have been easy to go, does your teacher know that you are here, or are you lying to your teacher, right? It's like what we were saying in the beginning of this episode is, are you defining this person as a liar, or are you interpreting the reason in which they are engaging in a lie? You know, because by saying, does your teacher know that you are here, or are you being a good sister? That's not a false dichotomy either. Like, which option was it? And that girl looked up at that teacher and said, I'm just here being a good sister. And then the teacher looked back to her and she said, okay, do you need any help with your sister, or do you have it covered? Are you good? And she said, we're good. Like, this is a conversation between like an adult person and what, grade 2 plus 5 and a 7-year-old. Like, the amount of emotional intelligence that was happening between these two. And I'm just standing there. I know I've been talking about this for like 30 minutes, it seems, but this was like a 20-second interaction. And then this teacher goes, okay, sweetheart, I'm going to go tell your teacher where you are. So you take your time and get your sister back to class. And I'm going to go tell your teacher so she knows where you are, so she doesn't worry about you, okay? And then she said, okay. And then she walked away and did that. The way that we use language, especially around kids, is so important just always. But that example, I just have such a problem letting go of that example. I think about that all the time. If you're new to my content, you might not know that I've been an elementary school teacher for 4 years of my life after I graduated from university. And I did take a step away from it while I'm doing my master's right now at the same time as moving to Calgary and pursuing this content creation stuff. But I think a reason why I struggled with not necessarily the politics of teaching, but the ways in which the adults interact with the kids, because I think these little seemingly minute differences in the way that we engage in language that inform the way that these kids form their sense of identity is so fucking important. And they're just such incredible small differences in the details of how you talk to people. And it's not just kids, but kids are more malleable in this example than potentially adults are, but not always. the way that we frame the behavior of others, especially when it comes to lying, to not imply this sense of blame, because most people are engaging in lies for their safety, for the safety of the people that they care about, or other reasons that aren't necessarily malicious. And in this example of this little girl, if she was meant to feel blame, or if she was meant to feel bad, or if she was meant to feel like she was a liar, that perpetuates how she's going to act for the rest of her life. Because if she was assigned this mental idea of being a liar when she got home that day or when she got back to that classroom, and there was an opportunity to either be authentic or to be a liar, her mental her idea of her being a liar would have come out and potentially influenced her behavior again, and it just builds and builds and builds, and then you're watering the redwood of lying again, and it just contributes to an overall negative life experience. So I encourage you to really be mindful of the ways that you talk to other people, and also the ways in which you talk to yourself about the behavior that you're not happy with within yourself, because you can't expect to be mean to yourself into doing better. You can't be shitty to yourself and expect better out of yourself. It doesn't work for other people, and it doesn't work for ourselves as well. You can't be bad to yourself and expect yourself to do better. I don't know how many times I can say that, but I'm saying this for me to you as well. And I'm not only am I saying this to you, I'm also saying this to me. This shit is so useful to me as well. And I'm not Gandhi sitting here in my like royal palace explaining it to you from like a top down approach. I'm just some girl here with a microphone and too many opinions who is interested in these conversations. And I want to think about this stuff, and I want you to be able to think about this stuff as well in starting these conversations. I said I was going to lead you. I said I was going to leave you with a comedic ending, and I just cried while telling you a story. Okay. It's the overt lying. And sometimes we just fall into it. And sometimes there's people in our life that we just end up lying to. Tell me, for whatever reason, I lied so much to my physical therapist. I hope he's not listening. He's probably not. But I don't know why. It just came out. And I would end up lying to him all the time about the smallest, seemingly little things. Not the things that were important for his not the things that were important for my physical therapy care. Like when he was like, do you smoke? I said yes. But like about my life, I was like, oh, I do this and I do that. But honestly, a lot of the things that I was lying about at the time were things that I wanted to get myself into, like drag in grad school and things like that. So if I were to have those same conversations now with that same man, none of those things, for the most part, I think, from my memory, from my recollection, wouldn't be lies anymore. But like you can't lie to people in an attempt to manifest those lies into reality. That's kind of messed up in its own way. But yeah, interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily other people that bring out that lying behavior in us, because I don't think we can assign that to other people really. If it, again, like I said in the beginning, if it's to maintain your sense of safety, that might make more sense for you to unpack it, because at some point the onus is on you, like we said earlier. But this man was really lovely. I don't know why. Sometimes there's those weird outliers that you just end up lying and you're like, what the hell? But I was very aware of those lies that I was telling to that man. So silly, so random. Okay, there's my comedic ending. You happy now? No, that was oh my god, girls. Okay, well, I think that's it. We got down to brass tacks. We talked about everything here today, didn't we? Good God. But no, in all seriousness, please be kind to yourself. Please be gentle with yourself. Put space around the things that you're uncomfortable with, especially those lies. Pay attention to the overt lies you tell other people. Pay attention to the ways in which you manipulate by omission in an attempt to control the ways in which other people see you. And for the love of God, pay attention to the ways in which you are deceiving yourself. You don't have to fix it today, but you do need to increase your awareness of those things today, even if just by 0.1%, because eventually you will starve the redwood lying tree. I don't know why I'm really stuck on it being a redwood, but sometimes those trees can grow very powerful, enough for you to carve a hole in to drive a hole through. Sorry, what? In order for you to drive a hole, in order for you to drive a, Jesus Christ, in order for you to drill a hole and drive a car through. So, besties, Thank you so much for listening to this episode of D-Talk. Like I said before, if you're interested in spending more time with me, season 1 and the first few episodes of season 2 are up on my YouTube channel. You can listen to them on Spotify as well. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok if you're interested in hanging out with me more, seeing my does size matter. I'm a singer, I'm a vocalist, I'm an educator. I'm studying education and neuroscience at a master's level right now. I'm a really nice and lovely person with a lot to offer. So thanks so much for spending this time with me. I hope you are able to embrace your critical thinking skills, lean into your cringe, develop your creativity, and prime yourself for connection. Because without those 4 C's, bestie, where the fuck you at? Oh God, but I feel like I'm really leaning into my authenticity here because like I can lie. Jesus, I'm feeling I'm feeling like I can really lean into my authenticity more and more as the days go by here, especially as it comes to my content. Like I can be here, I can be funny and provide you with stupid anecdotal stories. We can look at some research and some videos. We can talk about neuroscience, we can talk about personal things, and I can cry on camera with you. I don't know where the hell this is going. So thank you so much for spending this time with me here today, and I'll see you in the next one. And until next time, goodbye. Well, my jorts aren't on fire anymore, so I think we're good. Hey, babe, my jorts aren't on fire anymore. I want an ice cream after that. That was a lot.